Hey everybody, Eric here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're going okay. I've been thinking a lot about games that are inspired by a lot of newer games that are coming out that are very clearly influenced by some of our older favorite games. Of course, we love JRPGs like Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, and Chrono Trigger, and of course, it's only inevitable that some developers draw from those games as influences. Games like that are cream of the crop, 10 out of 10. They are generational titles, but is it fair to compare newer titles like Sea of Stars, for example, to something like Chrono Trigger? Let's discuss a few key elements. Graphics were a huge part of games, especially in the early days. The visual aesthetic of games from the 80s and 90s was pretty much due to hardware limitations. I mean, looking at a game like Star Fox on the Super Nintendo, for example, yeah, I mean, it's cool to see the Super Nintendo be able to play it, but obviously now it doesn't really look super flash. And even Donkey Kong Country, for example, it's a beautiful game and a lot of magic was worked in order to make that happen. But now in today's day and age, developers can make games look a specific style, like photorealistic games like Death Stranding, or intentionally 8-bit like Undertale. So when it comes to JRPGs, for example, a lot of developers are going to lean on a 16-bit style. Why? Well, because that was like the golden era of the JRPG, and it makes sense. However, when games look like that straight out of the gate, immediately we're starting to draw comparisons because that visual aesthetic is very evocative of that era of games like Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Final Fantasy VI, for example. Music, of course, is another incredibly important piece of the puzzle here. I mentioned Sea of Stars in the opening, and that game has some tracks composed by famed composer Yasunori Mitsuda. He's got a very distinct musical style that can carefully tread the balance between folk, rock, prog, and even orchestral at any given moment. His beloved arrangements have been a part of heavy hitter games like Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, and one of my favorite games of all time that you definitely need to play if you have not, Xenogears. And of course, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So it's safe to say that knowing his contributions to Sea of Stars, for example, will get people comparing. After playing the Sea of Stars demo and hearing one of the tracks that he's contributed to the game, it is pure bliss, and it takes me right back to those amazing games that I played growing up and even recently, like Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross on the world map. His style is just amazing, but I have to say, because he's contributed to the soundtrack of the game, is it fair for people to immediately start drawing comparisons because he was a key piece of Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, and of course he's a key piece of Sea of Stars? You see what I mean? Musical tropes, for example, don't really need to be discussed when comparing games because, of course, if there's a funny or aloof character, the music is going to be more whimsical or funny. Or if there's a foreboding bad guy like Sephiroth, of course, we're going to have like a massive prog rock orchestral arrangement like One Winged Angel, for example. These are just pinnacles of storytelling through the use of music, and of course, it's not strictly limited to video games. Gameplay has been evolving over years and years. For example, Dragon Quest really pioneered the JRPG formula, and Earthbound picked up on that Dragon Quest battle system and really made it look cool for one, but also more functional in a way that benefited the player with a rolling counter. So when you get hit, the player's HP bar rolls slowly, giving you a chance to actually counter that with a healing spell or a hamburger, for example. Final Fantasy, however, is where the stereotypical turn-based format was perfected. It's been cool to play other games that have their own unique takes like Live Alive and even Ark the Lad on PlayStation 1. The turn-based style is so genre-wide now that it's not even realistic to suggest one game copies another at this point. So is gameplay even a talking point for the argument, or is it fair to compare? You tell me. All I know is that if the gameplay is addictive and done well enough to the point where I don't even care about the outside noise of the story, for example, Triangle Strategy, which is a spiritual successor to Final Fantasy Tactics, I love that game. I played that game through twice to get the good ending, the golden route, or as it's called. And sometimes I didn't even care what Lord Serenoa was doing in House Wolford. I just wanted to do battles because I thought it was really, really fun. So sometimes great gameplay is very evocative of those older style games. But hey, if it's done well and it works, there's no point in comparing because it's just great all around. My takeaway in this video for you is this. The hype for Sea of Stars is unreal right now, and ever since we caught our first glimpse of it, everyone was saying that this game is the next Chrono Trigger. Well, to be fair, no it's not. It's Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars can be heavily inspired by Chrono Trigger, and hell, even have the composer from Chrono Trigger contribute to the game. But as much as I love Chrono Trigger and want a remake of Chrono Trigger or a remaster, I don't want another Chrono Trigger game in Sea of Stars. I want Sea of Stars to stand tall amongst the JRPG gods. And it's okay to be influenced or inspired by. Look at music. Music, there's only 12 notes. I mean, how much can we do that's unique and original without recycling things that have come before us? I think it's important to acknowledge those that have come before us in games, for example, like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VI, because we see those as cream of the crop, top tier, 10 out of 10s. And of course, all developers are going to be looking back towards those when they're making games. So is Sea of Stars the next Chrono Trigger? No, Sea of Stars is Sea of Stars. And it's not necessarily fair to compare the two because they are in their own right two very unique and distinct games that just so happen to have the same battle system and the same composer. So anyway, food for thought. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down below if there's any games that you feel have been fairly compared to each other just because they look the same, the music is styled the same, or maybe even the same composer has done some music for those two. So leave a like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already, comment down below, I reply and read everything. And hey, we'll see you again on the next video. Thank you so much for watching today.